Mother's openness to medicine and other medical interventions, male involvement, and post-delivery monitoring for the 24-hour period. So our informants were traditional birthing attendants in Matango, mothers who delivered at home and at Matango Health Center, and nurses who work at Matango Health Center. So here were some of the key barriers mothers experienced when pursuing a health facility delivery. So a lot of times mothers couldn't afford or thought they couldn't afford a health facility delivery if they didn't know the services were free of charge. Frequently, it was cited that husbands drank a lot and that they spent money for birthing plans on alcohol. Often roads were impassable, especially during rainy season, causing women not being able to use a vehicle to get to the health facility, and also poor birth planning. Often by the time women realized that they were in labor and attempted to make it to the health facility, they were too weak to walk if they couldn't have access to a vehicle. And also a lot of women said that family members were sometimes midwives or somebody in their community that they knew. And so it was hard for them to justify, especially to their husbands, going to the health facility to deliver. So these were some experiences that women have had at health facilities, and these are not necessarily at Matango. Some of them were, but not all of them. Some of them were at regional hospitals. So in general, feeling uncomfortable with the frequent checks to monitor cervix dilation. One woman mentioned that the doctor left cotton in the womb during a C-section and she required additional surgery. Verbal and physical abuse was common. They don't like the food they're given, or it's poor quality food after they deliver. They can't bathe for days sometimes after they deliver. Husbands and family members are treated poorly and not allowed to be in the delivery room. And then a TBA mentioned that sometimes hospitals are understaffed and mothers end up giving birth by themselves without a TBA, midwife, or nurse with them. And so these were just some quotes that I found really compelling to characterize some of those experiences. And even though these are anecdotal, I think it's just really important to point out that these are kind of the message, like the stories that are being circulated about what it's like to deliver at a facility. And so it was just interesting to me to read some of these. So for example, like the second one, I remember when I delivered in our referral hospital, when I was there was no water for 2 days. And within those 2 days, I did not take a shower. And you can imagine having that odor of blood, sweat, and medicine. The second or the third one is referring to abuse and harassment, saying there's no privacy and they can slap you or pinch you on the thighs. And sometimes they cut you with scissors, leaving you with wounds, etc. And so I recognize that these are contextual and, we don't necessarily know the full story of what happened in these situations, but it's interesting that kind of this is women's perceptions of health facility deliveries and that this may be what they're telling other people about delivering at facilities. So kind of going off of that, these are some other reasons why women would choose to have a home birth over health facility births. So they find it more easy for friends and family to visit them and bring them supplies. Mothers often have this belief that if they bring the baby outside of the hospital and expose them to the elements, that the umbilicus may become infected. As we saw in the previous slide, women are afraid of abuse and exposure. This is especially true for HIV positive patients, whom are maybe afraid that their status will be exposed or that people will tell each other or that somebody at the hospital will find out and tell other people in their community. They very frequently wanted to deliver in the position of their choice, and currently at Matango, the only position that's available is lithotomy, if I'm saying that correctly, when it's like the standard US position when you're in the hospital bed with your legs up. The cultural beliefs mentioned were evil eyes, amasanga, and practices burying the placenta. I'll talk about these in a little bit, but basically evil eyes is the idea that if somebody with, I'm sure you guys know this already, but if somebody with kind of a curse looks at a baby, they can cast a spell on the baby or the mother and cause death or injury. Amasanga is this is a belief that if the husband is unfaithful and the mistress sees the mother or baby, then again, they can become sick or injured or die. And then some mothers mentioned preferring to bury the placenta rather than disposing of it the way hospitals do. Some women didn't understand the importance of health facility births, and they thought that home births were just as safe. And they liked being able to be accompanied by the family members of their choice when they deliver at home. So what constitutes a culturally appropriate birthing space in Kisii? These are some of the components that came up frequently. So plenty of linen for beds and also to wrap the baby to keep it warm after delivery. Um, Mothers like knowing about stages of labor, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well, but they mentioned cervix dilation diagrams and models, pictures of delivery positions so they know what their options are, heaters because it often gets cold and the baby has to stay warm after delivery. Attentive care and respectful care was obviously very important. There were some quotes about women who they notice when their care is attentive or not, and so they will notice if the nurse is ignoring them, and that really impacts their experience. A lot of women mentioned the ability to bathe and have access to running water, and they wanted whoever they want in the delivery room. So there were very different opinions about whether husbands should be allowed or not, but ultimately it should be up to the individual mother because some women wanted their husband in the room and others did not. Oh, and the reason for that was interesting. Women often said that it impacts their sexual relationship with their husband because it can be really traumatizing for the husband to see childbirth. So that was often the reason why they didn't want their husbands in the room. So for furniture, they wanted mattresses on the floor so that they don't have to climb onto a bed that's high in the air. Stools to facilitate like a seated position during delivery. Rope from the ceiling to assist in a squatting position. I think a nurse mentioned that some women would like to sit when they are resting after delivery instead of having to lay down all the time. Frequently, women requested mosquito nets over their beds, and then a place for family or a TBA to stay so that the woman doesn't have to stay by herself, especially for that 24-hour post delivery period. In terms of clinic infrastructure, they requested cleaner rooms. They often said there was a odor that emanated from the room from the disinfectant that's currently used. They requested a transportation system such as like a boda to take them to the hospital or an ambulance to take them from the hospital or from the clinic to the hospital if they need a C-section. And then finally, they requested running water or access to water in general. Privacy was extremely important to all of the women pretty much. So they would really appreciate curtains to divide the rooms and long hospital gowns or maternity gowns for mothers so that they can have checkups easily to monitor the stages of delivery, but also stay covered. Food preferences included water, tea, ugali, Coca-Cola, bread, kale, porridge, and chinsaga. And they expressed needing only warm beverages before delivery to stimulate delivery and milk production. And then some of the nurses mentioned needing certain supplies for the facility, such as gowns, gloves, gumboots. And in general, there were reports that there are more blankets needed, bed sheets, basins, pads, gas to heat up water, sugar, linen, and water for patients. So then these were some of the birthing positions they preferred. I think it's interesting that none of the women mentioned lithotomy position, which is all that's offered at Matongo. One of the nurses was under the impression that women liked that position, so I thought that was an interesting discrepancy there. And then these were just some quotes about how important a birthing position may be. So it was clear that when women are in labor, it can be very painful or impossible for them to climb up onto a raised bed before delivery. So these were some of the cultural beliefs which I went over previously. And the main point of these, I think, was kind of getting at the idea that privacy is really important, because both of these involve other people seeing mothers and their babies at the facility, and they're really afraid of these two beliefs. And so privacy can make a big impact on who is able to see mothers and their babies before and after delivery. And this was just a quote about evil eyes. So this is a spell cast from the eyes of an evil person. With just a look, the person transfers some evil materials to your child, and all of a sudden your child develops fever, stomach ache, and even death, maybe some seconds away. Um, Almost done. So these are traditional birthing practices. When labor is not progressing, the mother sometimes blows into a gourd. And one of the TBAs mentioned that this isn't done so much anymore. But one I thought was interesting is when a woman is too tired to blow into the gourd, a strong man may come to suck air from her mouth to kind of have the same effect. And that was cited quite a few times. Also mentioned was putting lizard waste on the umbilicus to facilitate healing. And then these were some ways to stimulate childbirth using herbs. I apologize if any of the spelling is wrong. I went off of whatever was transcribed, but I'm not sure if they're accurate. I couldn't find all of them online. And these are just some more herbs that are used for various reasons. And the main point of all of this is just to say that there are traditional birthing practices and remedies that are used, at least in home births. Whether they're available or not at the facility, I'm not sure, but just allowing women the ability to have those choices, I think, is important. So then the nurse's understanding of these cultural beliefs and practices was another area of interest. So we interviewed two nurses. Both of them knew that mothers preferred not to have medical interventions unless they really needed them, including pain medicine. They both knew that privacy was important and that there were traditional remedies present in Kisii, but they didn't know many examples of those. One nurse knew that mothers don't like to deliver on the beds, and only one nurse mentioned knowledge of cultural beliefs. And in general, both nurses discouraged the use of herbs and traditional remedies before labor to prevent fetal distress. So mother's understanding of labor. These are things that they want to know about, including like how the progress of labor, so cervix dilation, which kind of goes back to the models and the diagrams they requested to be present in the room. They wish to know when it's time to start pushing, when delivery is approaching, if they need a C-section, how their blood pressure is doing, if the baby's healthy, how much time is left during labor. And then one of the nurses mentioned that labor can sometimes be longer and more painful for nulliparous women, and that women appreciate knowing this ahead of time if they have never had a child before. So openness to medical interventions. In general, mothers did not like medical interventions, but they recognize the importance of having them if there is a complication, and that giving birth at a facility kind of enables them to have access to life-saving measures for them and their baby. They were okay with non-invasive monitoring techniques like vital signs and urine output. In terms of medication, they were okay with antibiotics and immunizations, but they generally did not want pain medicine. And so here were some kind of more traditional remedies to alleviate pain. And yeah, so episiotomy, they were usually resistant to that. One of the nurses mentioned that once they explained episiotomies, what they're for, and that they would be sutured up afterwards, women were a little bit more accepting of that, but in general, they were resistant. And male involvement. So there were some anecdotes of men not being treated well when they come to the facility to accompany their wives or family members. So husbands working in other towns like Nairobi or other cities, inhibits a mother's ability to stay for the 24-hour monitoring period. And then one thing that was interesting was that men sometimes don't accompany their wives or family members due to shame, because they see that their wife is in pain and they feel embarrassed or shameful because they quote unquote inflicted that pain among or upon their wife. And then, as mentioned previously, a lot of women don't like their husbands in the room because it impacts their sexual relationship. And I just thought this quote was particularly compelling. After giving birth, the woman will tie your stomach. When the stomach is tucked in, your husband will love you, but when it is hanging, the husband will not like you. So it was just kind of getting at the point that women are may feel self-conscious during this time around their husband, and that is something that should be considered. So for the post-delivery monitoring, mothers were more open to staying for this length of time when they understood how important it is. But sometimes it just wasn't possible for women to stay if they had children at home that they had to come back and take care of. And then these were some reasons that, or some things that would encourage them to stay. So as always, they requested small incentives listed on the right. So diapers, pads, linen, food, basins, etc. Mosquito nets, quality food, drinking water, privacy, clean rooms, and sleeping with their baby, and having family able to visit them were also important. Bless you. So then that leads to recommendations. I didn't put any in this PowerPoint because I thought that should be more of a conversation to start out, at least before I impose what I think onto this project. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, I'd love to talk to you about it. Oh.
Hey Dana, just a comment. It's interesting how a lot of what you said is very similar to what was said in your go-to during the formative research. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I noticed that too, because I read the formative research reports for Matongo, like before I started these studies, and I did notice some overlap. So it was interesting to kind of have a lot of those beliefs like reinforced almost from this study as well.
Yeah, and even a lot of the health facility stuff you said is very similar to what was said for the Nyagoto formative research. So maybe some of the issues are more like across the board than we, yeah,
Yeah,
they're
I
more
definitely,
common than we would like to acknowledge.
yeah, I think that's true. I think a lot of these issues are not specific to, or I really definitely don't think they're specific to MHC. I think that it's kind of like widespread with lots of health facilities and hospitals in the area. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Hey Dana, hey, I like the way your work was thorough and it really delved on many issues. Some that I think we need to present this also to the health facility staff and the MIH. Yeah. So, what do you recommend? Maybe we start the discussion that way.
Yeah. So that might be a whole separate presentation. I think so. One thing that I think was really important would be to just advertise, well, conduct community outreach to kind of share with mothers that the facility is free of charge, because that was mentioned a lot, that a lot of women can't afford facility deliveries. Um, and so that would probably be step one. And then I have a lot of recommendations. I'll have to make another PowerPoint about that. But off the top of my head, including some training for the health facility staff the on the cultural beliefs and traditional remedies. I think allowing mothers the opportunity to engage in those practices, as long as they don't interfere with the care they receive. I think that would be important. Yeah, including men in the process. I think that they definitely need to be engaged, finding ways to encourage them to prioritize a health facility delivery and reduce any stigma around like the birthing process. And it was really upsetting to me to read about like women feeling so self-conscious about what is happening and being concerned about the effect of childbirth on their sexual relationship with their husband. That was just really startling. So I think there is some work that could be done there. Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, so many thoughts.
I know.
This has been really great, Dana. Something that occurred to me with a lot of the traditional practices that were mentioned was that this I feel like is something we currently really don't have in Matongo, and I think that it's something that would be strange almost for the nurses to have to learn and try to provide to the women themselves. Like, mentioning the pouring of the warm water over the belly or dissolving an herb on the back. And so for me, one of my takeaways was that this to me is like a great way to demonstrate what is the TBA's role during the birth at the health clinic. So she is the one who could be, making the herbs, being like providing that cultural experience and responding to the mother's desire for pain reduction, and other things through traditional methods. Yeah, so I saw this really outlined the role of the TBA and what she could be doing in Matongos. Because right now, from I think it was either yours or Lindsay, someone's feedback, it said that the TBAs essentially drop them off and help more with logistics, but they could really be doing so much more than that. And that seems like the mothers would like that role.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely with that. I think
Hello?
yeah.
Oh, okay. We lost you for a
We hear people
second.
talking, so we didn't know if they could still hear us.
We can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Did you have any comments on what Barbara said?
Yeah, maybe on Dana, thank you very much for the presentation. You talked about mothers can't afford going to the delivering at health facility. Maybe now you elaborate on your point, because now the deliveries are free. I don't know what the mothers were talking about.
Yeah, so I think the issue there is that maybe they don't know that the facility is free of charge, and so their belief is that it will cost them money if they go. So I think one thing that could be done is just, like what you're doing currently, just community engagement and like spreading awareness that the facility is free of charge. And I know that's something that you're doing already through the TBAs and but I think continuing to spread that message will make an impact there.
Yeah, or maybe sometimes they say when they come to the facility, they have to come with the sanitary towels, with maybe money for gloves, and sometimes they are asked for money unknowingly. They'll give unknowingly. Maybe they don't know it's free. And also buying the blanket. You have to buy a good blanket, a good sheet for the baby. So I think that's how they feel it's expensive. Because at home you just cut a torn blanket to carry the baby, or cut torn blankets as pads, sanitary towel, and use it as a sanitary towel during a postpartum, maybe when you're after delivery. And if you don't need diapers when you go to the facility, because most of the time when they go to the hospital, you have to come with diapers so that the baby will don't certify hospital linen.
Is that the case at Matongo as well, that they have to bring those things, or can they bring like what you mentioned, like
In
clothes?
Matongo now, when we did our formative research in Matongo, we found that as a gap, and so we provide for every mother we provide sanitary towels and what are they called? Diapers for the baby.
Diapers? Mm-hmm.
Yes. At least 3
Yeah.
diapers and four pads for the mother.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that will
I think
encourage
that's
them to come to the facility because they don't have to fear that they don't have money for the pads, they don't have money for the diapers. Because in other facility you have to come. When you come into delivery, you have to show your 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 full pack of sanitary towel and some diapers.
Yeah, and a lot of these quotes and a lot of this data came from women who delivered at home who have never been to the Matongo Health Center. So they might not know all of these things, that they are provided with those things, which may have led to their comments about, worrying about cost and all of that. So yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, this project is still relatively new, within like a year or so. So I think the message is still getting out there to women in the community that these services are free and that they're provided with diapers and sanitary towels. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I think, and I know you kind of like a lot of the like furniture and stuff you already knew and have implemented into the room, which is great. So I think in terms of like furniture and the actual birthing room itself, like we're pretty close to being there. We already have mattresses on the floor, and I know you have a stool in there, so that's definitely on the right track, which I thought was reassuring.
Venye mko mfungua wote. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Are there
And also
mosquito nets currently?
something else to add on, the Amasanga, it's not Amasanga, it's Amasangi. There's an I at the end, not an A.
So I was told that it's an I for like because I was confused about that too. I was told that Amasanga is the practice and the belief, and that Amasangi is the like herbal remedy that is given to prevent
No, it's
Amasanga.
all Amasangi. It's
It's always
Amasangi.
okay.
Yeah, it's
Sorry
just
about that.
Amasangi.
I'll change it.
Yeah, it's Amasangi.
Okay, I will change that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, it's a very nice presentation, well detailed, and as per Kevin's advice, we need to present this to the entire MOH team.
Yeah.
Is that something, and that, well, we have a recording of Dana's presentation just now. So we can provide it that way, or if you want, we could try to find a time where we can meet like this through any meeting, and Dana can be here to answer questions or do that presentation again. Did you guys have a preference?
Recording is okay, because this is actually these things keep repeating. If you look at formative research, Iranda, the same things repeat. So it's a good idea that we present to MOH and any other interested party.
And I think probably, Dana, you could send them the PowerPoint,
Oh, yeah.
so you guys can adjust it as needed. Or I'm sure you probably even have some pictures now too from the old birthing space, or something that you can adjust it as you would like, I guess.
Yes.
Well, yeah. And based on this presentation, have you figured out extracts that you're going to include in the core conference poster?
Can you say that one more time? You said experts?
Based on this presentation, have you figured out extracts, key areas that you're going to include in the core conference poster?
You mean like what I'm going to focus on for the poster?
Yeah.
So I kind of was hoping that would be a conversation that we had to figure out what you all think is kind of like the most salient, just for the context. Obviously you know a lot about this too. So I'm happy to, what I'm thinking is I can send you a list of my recommendations now that we've kind of talked about it, and I can kind of highlight what I think should go on the poster and then get your feedback on that.
And I feel like you really did a great job in this presentation of like dividing it into themes. So like privacy, I thought was an important theme. Well, I'm just going to keep harping on the TBAs being there, but traditional practices, knowledge, like understanding what's happening to them during the birth. So I think like, I don't know, I feel like it's the recommendations will be great, and we definitely need to know what our plan is for discussions at the conference. But I think a lot of what the poster will focus on is the findings. So, but again, I guess Kevin and Ann, if there are any findings that you feel like were especially relevant, since you guys are so familiar with the context and expectations and assumptions of Kisii and of Kenya, like that would be like if there are any like big aha moments, like that might be things that Dana would want to make sure are included.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the best way forward is maybe Dana to highlight the key areas where, and then we provide feedback, and then it will be an exchange, and then maybe we discuss after we have versions, drafts of the poster after the recommendations, and then until we have a perfect one for Anna and Peter.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Great. Well, fortunately, we have Dana here with us every week, so we can continue this conversation as needed and as questions come up. And also, I believe there's a final report coming out in a few weeks or whatever. So we'll have a more detailed information for you guys as backup to give to the MOH and whatnot soonish.
And of course, if you continue to look over this and have questions, don't hesitate to email me or text me or whatever.
Okay.
All right. Thanks for listening. This was a fun study. I enjoyed it.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you,
yeah,
Dana.
and it's a fun presentation, the way you're saying those kissy terms.
Masangai.
Yeah.
The way you're pronouncing those kissy terms is really
Oh,
silly.
yeah.
Was her Swahili not perfect or her Kikisi not perfect? Sounded really good to me. I don't know.
Left out a few of the
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just write those down.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good one.